Jeremiah 29 verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. This verse was originally spoken to the Israelites, who were exiled in Babylon, as a promise that God would restore them to their homeland after 70 years of captivity. It's a reminder that even when life feels dark and uncertain, God is working behind the scenes to fulfill His good purposes. There was a young woman named Sarah who dreamed of becoming a nurse. Ever since she was a child, she had a deep desire to help others and make a difference in their lives. However, Sarah grew up in a poor neighborhood, and her family could barely afford her basic needs, let alone pay for her college education. When Sarah finished high school, her dream of becoming a nurse seemed impossible. Her parents encouraged her to find a job instead of pursuing college. Heartbroken but determined, Sarah prayed every night, asking God why her dreams felt so out of reach. She remembered her pastor once sharing Jeremiah 29 verse 11 and whispered those words in her prayers. One day, while working at a small grocery store, Sarah met an elderly woman named Mrs. Cruz. They often talked, and Sarah would help Mrs. Cruz carry her groceries. One day, Mrs. Cruz asked Sarah about her dreams. Sarah hesitated but eventually shared her story about wanting to be a nurse. A few days later, Mrs. Cruz returned with unexpected news. She told Sarah she had a foundation that helped underprivileged youth pursue their education. If Sarah was serious about her dream, Mrs. Cruz offered to sponsor her nursing school tuition. Sarah was speechless. She had prayed for years, and now an opportunity she never imagined was placed before her. However, the road wasn't easy. Sarah faced tough classes, long hours, and even moments of doubt. She would often remind herself of Jeremiah 29 verse 11, trusting that God's plans for her were good, even when the journey felt overwhelming. Over time, she graduated as a top nursing student and eventually started working at a hospital where she could care for people in need, just as she had always dreamed. Years later, Sarah reflected on her journey. If someone had told her during those dark times that her prayers would be answered, she might not have believed them. But now, she understood. God's timing was perfect. He used Mrs. Cruz as an instrument of blessing, but the years of struggle shaped Sarah into someone resilient, compassionate, and grateful. This story mirrors the message of Jeremiah 29 verse 11. Sometimes, life feels uncertain, and we wonder if our prayers are heard. But God is always working, even in ways we cannot see. His plans may not unfold immediately or in the way we expect, but they are always for our good. Like Sarah, we need to trust that He has a purpose, even in our struggles. So when you feel like giving up, remember that God has a plan to give you hope and a bright future. Keep trusting Him, because the story He's writing for you is far greater than you can imagine.